Guys, let's move over to North Carolina. I've termed them Mac Brown and the half team prince. UNC was one of the most outlandish half teams last year where their offense is putting up 60 plus in games, while their defense is also allowing 60 plus. Of course, I'm talking about that shootout against App State, the 63-61 victory in week 2. They scored 56 against Florida A&M. Congrats, but you gave up 24. It was a very close game against Georgia State. And then you look at the losses on that schedule. Notre Dame comes in week 4, and then a 4-game losing streak kicked off by Georgia Tech of all teams. The Fighting Brent Prize got them, and UNC was just never quite the same. Mac Brown is at a really interesting crossroads this season, right? He's in search of win number 100 in his second stint with the Tar Heels. Chip Lindsey is now the first-year offensive coordinator. Phil Longo goes to Wisconsin. We're really excited about that. Lindsey was the architect behind the explosive UCF offense last season. And then Gene Chizik, right? A national championship winning head coach in his own right, but the defense ranked 116th last year in total defense. They were giving up nearly 440 yards per game, 30 points per game to opposing offenses. And guys, that's not a recipe for winning football. I know they have an explosive offense, but when it doesn't show up, when you're losing 39-10 against Clemson, you need a defense that can step up and get a stop, and they just weren't able to get that last year. I will say, for Tar Heel fans, I don't know that the defense is going to be that much better, but it certainly can't get worse, I wouldn't think. You look at linebackers, Power Eccles, Cedric Gray. I think they're going to be good captains in the middle of that field. And then I like a couple of their cornerbacks, although when I was looking at team strengths and team weaknesses, I think the weakness of this Tar Heels defense is going to be the secondary again. Now, Elijah Huzzy and Armani Chapman. Huzzy's from East Tennessee State, had 6 picks last year. Armani Chapman is from Virginia Tech, played and started 49 games for the Hokies. If they're going to take a step forward, they're going to have to be big pieces to that because the secondary was just so bad last year. They couldn't stop anybody. They had a wave of transfers out. They don't have a single starter back for 2023. The offense is a whole lot of fun under Drake May, who could be the first overall pick in this next year's NFL draft. But I don't know that being a half team is the way to contend for an ACC title. We all have them in the mix, but I think ultimately that's going to be what holds them back.
Yeah, I think if you're North Carolina, you have to hope that this really is addition by subtraction on the defense. With as many guys that left you, I think you have to hope that, maybe somehow that was just a bad mix. And you just didn't have the right guys on the field. And hopefully, maybe, this year, new faces across the board can make a few more plays. It's really hard to not play defense and win consistently. I'm tempted to be inclined to say that they fall a little bit in terms of what their expectations are, just because I don't see how you can sustain that level of defense that consistently, right? I mean, they did not play very good defense. If you look back at the graphic, I mean, the defensive numbers are pretty low. The 116th, 86, 116th, 96,
A lot of triple
102,
digits there.
128. Yeah, not a lot of great numbers to hang your hat on if you're one of the Tar Heels. So, and again, maybe it was just the players. Maybe they just don't know how to play in the system. Maybe they just weren't good fits. That's what you got to hope for if you're a North Carolina fan, because otherwise things could be a little interesting this year as they have to, maybe they don't meet that level on defense. Maybe they get into some more shootouts, and you got to hope that Drake May can keep up the success now that some of these opposing defenses have film on him.
And, I have North Carolina contending for a conference title. I think we all solidly have them in that top tier. I have them going 10-2 on my first little run through the projections here, but you just know they're going to drop a game that they're not supposed to, right? That defense, you can look at several teams throughout the ACC. I think Wake Forest is another one that, their offense is going to put up a bunch of points. It's going to be explosive, but they're going to drop a game that they shouldn't, that they're the more talented team, that they have the quarterback advantage. That Georgia Tech game last year is a prime example, right? They have no business dropping that game. I know they had already locked up. I think they had already locked up a conference title game appearance at that point, but they were 9-1. And we were talking about them on our show saying, hey, don't forget about the Tar Heels for the college football playoff. And then they go drop a game to Georgia Tech and make us look like fools. So,
Yeah.
I mean, when you
Bad timing.
are a half team, you are going to drop games that you shouldn't drop. That on paper, you should beat them. App State was almost that last year. Georgia Tech was one last year. They've got a tricky non-conference game against Minnesota this year. But,
Ew.
I mean, yeah, you got to hope that those transfers that you brought in, I love that Mac Brown's trying. I love that he is, throwing anything at the wall to see what sticks, and turning over that secondary room that absolutely needed some new blood in it. But yeah, where's the proof in this Mac Brown tenure that they are going to run through a schedule? I'm mostly talking to myself here because I have them at 10-2. Where's the proof that they run through the schedule and the games, even that they're just supposed to win? I don't think that they've proven that as a program yet.
Yeah. Garrett, if you'll pull their schedule back up, I've got UNC going 9-3, finishing 4th in the conference. I have them losing to South Carolina. They play them in the opener in Charlotte. I think I'm strangely talking myself into South Carolina being a pretty plucky team this year. I think they lost a lot of production. And if I'm wrong on that, it's going to be because the defense can't get any pass rush, and they can't move the football unless Spencer Rattler is just having a great game. But you could say the very same thing about North Carolina. You saw their defensive stats, 128th in the country in sacks, 1.28 sacks per game. That is almost dead last in the FBS. Gene Chizik has to find a way to get pressure on the quarterback. He's admitted that. I don't think you could say anything other than, hey, my bad. But until they do that, they're going to remain an incredible half team. Drake May, he's got a bunch of fun weapons to work with this year. They've got a fun running back trio. British Brooks is healthy this season. Elijah Green, Omarion Hampton, who was a standout true freshman last year. And then probably the most fun piece, you have a Kent State transfer in Devontae Walker coming in. He's supposed to be the Josh Downs replacement, right? Which that's not going to be an easy guy to replace. Josh Downs is kind of your offense last year, especially when British Brooks wasn't able to play during the regular season. They do have 4 starters back on the offensive line. Awesome Richards is gone to the draft as a Dallas Cowboy, but they have 4 other starters, and then Willie Lampkins transfers in from Coastal. So the offensive line should be pretty good. Drake May, we know what he is. He's a Heisman-level quarterback, a top 5 draft pick. I'm really, really excited to watch what he can do. But that being said, you've got a tricky start to the beginning of the season. South Carolina, you mentioned Trey, Minnesota comes in, and then early bye. Those early buys can be death, especially for a half team, right? When the defense doesn't have a chance to lick its wounds. You're talking about having to go on the road to Georgia Tech, play a Campbell team that is not a lay-down FCS opponent. They're one of the best teams in the FCS, certainly on the offensive side. So, hey, a team with defensive struggles, you might give up a lot of points to the Fighting Camels. And then you've got Duke, Clemson, and NC State, teams that we think are going to be relatively dangerous on the offensive side. So, I don't know, guys. I mean, as we wrap up the UNC preview, I think this is a crossroads for Mac Brown. I wrote about that in our 5 storylines for the ACC article on the Transfer Portal CFB website. I don't know what Mac Brown does if this season goes sideways on him. Maybe he retires. Maybe he sticks around. He's recruiting really well. But I think the Tar Heels have to find a way to be in contention for the ACC crown. Otherwise, I honestly don't know where he goes from here.
Yeah, it's going to be, a tricky start, very tricky close. That middle definitely has an opportunity to make some hay there. Not a lot of defenses you're scared of if you're Drake May in the offense, but very tricky start, very tricky close for North Carolina.
Yeah, and I almost wonder if the middle will kind of lull them to sleep in terms of how highly they have to execute on the offensive side of the football, right? I'm curious to see if maybe, when they hit Duke and Clemson at the end of the year, if they haven't been used to playing a defense like that, if they haven't been used to having to come with their A game and, convert some of those tough third downs and things like that. Really curious to see how they bounce back on that. I, like Mitch, I also have them going 9-3. I think they lose to South Carolina to open, and I will also pick them to lose to Duke and Clemson at the end of the year as well.
Gracious, how about